Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and I know it's another Ben Simmons video. I'm sick of making them. I'm sure you're sick of hearing about him, but he is the biggest piece on the trade market at this point, and there have been some interesting reports that have come out since the last time I made a video on him. So here I am again talking about Ben Simmons. This is probably the last time you'll hear his name, or at least see him in the title of a video until the trade deadline officially rolls around, which is February 10th, so about 15 days away. Super excited for that to roll around. I might do a live stream of it when it happens. Let me know if you do want to see that in the comment section below, and if enough people want it, I'll definitely make it happen. But for right now, let's talk about some of the reports that have come out about Ben Simmons. Mainly, one came out today from Shams, who said that Daryl Morey is content on holding on to Simmons past the trade deadline and into the offseason, where he could hopefully get back a guy like James Harden for Ben Simmons. And a lot of people on the report are like, why would the Nets give up James Harden? Like, they're going to waste MVP and Embiid. What are they doing? And so I kind of wanted to go through the pros and cons of holding on to Ben Simmons or trading him at this deadline and kind of figure out, what should the Sixers do at this point. When we look at this season, because that's really all we know is right now this season. We can talk about what happens next season or the offseason, but right now what we know is that Embiid is playing like one of the best players in the world. He's averaging 34 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, and 5 assists through the year of 2022, and that's a pretty sizable sample size since we're almost at the end of January. So that's over almost an entire month of play he's putting up those numbers. For me, at worst, he's second in the MVP race. I might even have him first, and the Sixers feel like they could seriously make some noise in the playoffs, even if they don't get a return for Ben Simmons. But the main problem is they lack a consistent second option. A lot of times Embiid has to completely take over, not just because he can, which he can do pretty much whenever he wants, but because they don't really have that consistent second option. Tobias Harris making a max contract isn't really that consistent of a scorer to be that second option for them on a night-to-night basis. Tyrese Maxey's pretty fun, but he's still pretty young and he's inconsistent every now and again. Seth Curry is more of a great shooter. He is a pretty efficient scorer and he's gotten a lot better in that area of his game, but he's not really yet a second option on the championship team in terms of scoring. So it feels like they need a second option. And conveniently, they have Ben Simmons, who they could easily trade, or maybe not easily, but there are packages out there that they could trade him for to bring in maybe another second option, or at worst, just fill this team out with a lot of depth and make them really deep so that even if they don't have a consistent second option, they've got a bunch of great, maybe like third or fourth options that on any given night, one of them can step up and be that second guy, or if they all step up at once, it's just going to be really hard to stop that Sixers team. So there are some packages out there. So you might be asking, why would they wait till the offseason? Of course, as was mentioned in the report, they want to try and get back a superstar player for Ben Simmons like a James Harden. And waiting is very high risk, very high reward, because you could get a James Harden. And you might once again be asking, why would the Nets trade James Harden for that? Well, the thing is, James Harden isn't signed next season. He has a player option, which he could accept, but he's going to decline it because if he goes into the offseason, he could sign like a $50+ million contract. So he could take an extension right now, or he could decline his player option in the offseason and sign a contract worth more than that extension would be worth when that time comes around. Plus, he can kind of just test his value, see what's out there, and Philly kind of seems like a good option for him. If you look at the 76ers, you kind of look at Daryl Morey, him and James Harden work together a lot through their use in Houston. You've got Joel Embiid there, of course, who is a young MVP caliber player. You can see what he's doing. And James Harden looks like he'd be a great fit next to Embiid, a good shooter, a great entry passer, and someone that the two of them could play really well together. Imagine a pick and roll of those two. It would be ridiculous. There'd be like no way to stop that. And of course, the Nets have had their issues. You've had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving both deal with some injuries. Kyrie, the whole vaccination thing. There could be a potential where James Harden is just like, this isn't all what I signed up for. I see maybe another window to go to Philly, try and win a championship there. The problem is he can't outright sign there. So to get to Philadelphia, because they don't have the cap space with Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid under contract, Philly would have to trade something to the Brooklyn Nets in what's called a sign and trade. If you don't know what that is, basically James Harden signs a contract and immediately gets traded to the team that he wants to actually be on, and that team gives up some players. We've seen it with Kevin Durant going to the Nets very recently with D'Angelo Russell going to the Golden State Warriors. It happens a lot of the time with those superstar players. So that's definitely a valid option. If James Harden wants to leave, then the Nets could either lose James Harden for nothing, or they could get back in a sign and trade a guy like a Ben Simmons, who could be a good fit for that Nets team, bring them some defense, be a guy that can kind of just be a facilitator for Kyrie, who has shown that he can play really well off ball, and Kevin Durant, who fits in pretty much any system. So that is definitely an option they could go with. Maybe he could even run some small ball center at times, being 6'11", they've had issues with having big guys and centers kind of kick their butts. So maybe they bring in a guy like Ben Simmons that can defend the wing, point guard, whatever they need him to do. He's a defensive player of the year caliber guy. That could be a pretty big piece for them. If they've got to lose James Harden, that could be a good route for them to go. So it looks like there is potential for it to work. But of course, there is absolutely no guarantee that James Harden wants to leave. None at all. There haven't been reports that he's unhappy, at least none that I have personally seen or remember. There haven't been reports that he really wants to go to Philly. I'm sure he's interested because, like I said, Joel Embiid is a great talent, but there haven't been any concrete reports that he wants out, at least none from a guy like Woj or Shams that could give you some really credible information. So waiting, what if you wait till the offseason and James Harden's like, nah, I'm gonna stay in Brooklyn, I'm chilling. And then you go look at the Blazers with Damian Lillard and they're like, nah, we're gonna keep building around Dame. And then you look at the Wizards and they're like, we're gonna sign Beal to a supermax, he's gonna stay here. And then your options quickly run out and you're at the exact same spot, and say you didn't win a championship, like I presume they probably won't at this point with the current team they have, unless Embiid decides to average 40, which, could happen. But say they don't win a championship, now they've wasted that season where they could have traded him at the deadline, and they're still stuck with kind of the same packages. And you could see Ben Simmons' value deteriorate over time as people kind of forget what kind of player he is. He hasn't played in like a year if you do reach that offseason point, so that's a really long time. You don't know how much he's been working on stuff, and if he was willing to sit out that long through the end of a season, assuming he doesn't come back at any point this year, like it doesn't seem like he will, then maybe you're kind of worried about his attitude around things, and if a holdout for your team at some point. There's a lot of valid concerns, so it's high risk, high reward. If you can get a guy like a James Harden, maybe it's worth sacrificing this season. But if you go out there and the trade market is dry and you have the exact same offers or even less offers, and you wasted the season of Embiid playing the way he is, that's a big letdown for a guy like Embiid and for Philly fans in general. That really could lower your championship window. You just unnecessarily knock off a year. If everyone is healthy on that Brooklyn Nets team, there's a chance they win it all this season if they all get healthy. And if they win it all, I don't think James Harden leaves. So that's another thing you have to be concerned about. What if they go on and win it all? And James Harden's like, okay, why would I leave this after I just won a ring for the first time? You also throw in the fact that Embiid, while he is having a historic season and looks like an MVP going forward, he's a big man, and he's a guy who's had some injuries in the past, and God forbid he somehow gets injured, then you've got the question of, wow, Embiid just had this MVP caliber season, and we wasted it because we wanted to wait, and now he's hurt, and maybe he doesn't reach the same level of dominance that he's reached now. He's having one of the best big man seasons we've ever seen at this point, at least in the modern era. Shooting threes, I've made a whole video talking about Embiid. I don't need to go on about it. You know how great he is. So to waste that would be awful. That would be catastrophic. I'm sure they're going to ask Embiid about his input. There's no way they go to Embiid and Embiid is like, I want you to make a trade now, and they don't make a trade. You have to keep a guy like that happy. If Embiid says, I want you to make a deal, and they give him some input, and he's like, this is the deal I want, they're probably going to make it. Because overall, the goal is to keep Embiid happy. He's an MVP caliber player, a top 6, 5, whatever you want to say player in this league right now. So, it's a high risk, high reward. And so, instead, we come back to the trade deadline, which kind of seems like most people's answer for when Ben Simmons will get traded. And we look at some of the available trade offers that kind of should factor into this whole decision if you hold on to him or you go into the trade deadline with kind of the mentality of we're going to deal him. The main teams that kind of seem like they're available are teams like the Hawks, the Pacers, the Kings, and the Blazers. Those are 4 of the teams that we've been hearing the most. There are definitely other suitors out there, but let's take a look at some of the trade packages they could get. We go to the Atlanta Hawks. Probably the main guy that it would be centered around is a John Collins. Maybe they somehow get a DeAndre Hunter out of that. Maybe they get like a Bogdanovich. Maybe they get like a Kevin Huerter, something like that out of it. But John Collins is the main piece. And what we're kind of trying to look at here is, do you get back a second option or that depth that we were talking about? With the John Collins trade, I don't like it. It doesn't make a lot of sense because you still have Tobias Harris. Now, if you can somehow deal Tobias Harris in that deal, which is going to kind of muddy things up because Tobias Harris, while he is a decent player, he has a massive contract and one that is honestly too big for the production that he gives you on a night-to-night basis. So, you're going to have to probably sacrifice a little bit of the value you get back, maybe in terms of picks or in terms of young players, to have them absorb that Tobias Harris contract because that is a lot of money. So, is that worth it? And I'm not quite sure that it is. Now, there is a route if you can get off that money, because if you get off Tobias Harris's money and you get back maybe like an expiring contract, then you're kind of looking at something, because maybe that James Harden trade that you were looking at still becomes possible because you can clear up a lot of money by dealing Ben Simmons' max contract and getting back some contracts that can expire. That is another reason why maybe they throw in Tobias Harris, take back a little less value for this season to get maybe some additional pieces like a John Collins, but also clear up a little bit of space. So there's kind of some back and forth, push and pull there, but overall, unless they get rid of Tobias Harris in that deal, John Collins doesn't make sense. He plays the same position as Tobias Harris. I don't think Tobias is really a small forward. I think he's more of a power forward. He's not super mobile, and all around, he's just kind of inconsistent, so I'm not a huge fan of it. I think the Sixers more so want kind of a ball handler. John Collins isn't that type of player. So overall, I'm not a huge fan of that for the Sixers. If the Hawks can get Ben Simmons, I think that would be a great deal for them. But we're looking at this from Daryl Morey's perspective, so nothing too much there unless you can get off Tobias Harris. Moving to the Pacers, Domantas Sabonis. He's the big guy that would probably be centered around. You could maybe get like a Karis LeVert or TJ Warren, but TJ Warren he hasn't played in super long, and we don't know what's going on with his injury. Karis LeVert, he's fine, but I don't really see him as much of a needle mover. And Sabonis, once again, a power forward, does not fit on that team. Even if you do get rid of Tobias Harris, Sabonis isn't much of a shooter, and then you just become kind of a post-centric team. I don't think it makes a ton of sense. So overall, I'm not a huge fan. Moving on to the Blazers, which this is kind of the deal that a lot of people have been looking at, whether it's Dame or CJ McCollum. Dame is not going anywhere. They're not going to trade him. So CJ is probably the big... What the hell did I just do? Dame is probably CJ, is probably still the big option that you want to look at. So when you look at CJ McCollum, the problem is I don't think he does a lot for that team. Now, he does give you a second option. That he is a pretty good second option to have. Maybe you want him as more of a third option if you're trying to compete, but overall, I think he's a fine second option to have, especially if you've got other good scoring options like, say you hold on to Tobias Harris, you've got Tyrese Maxey, you've got Seth Curry, you've got some guys that can put up some points. The problem is, I think they want more of a facilitator, and CJ McCollum can do that, but to me, CJ McCollum is kind of just like a much better version of Seth Curry. Seth Curry already kind of does the things that CJ McCollum does, and if you want to start CJ McCollum, you have to bench Seth Curry, or you start them together in a backcourt. You can't start one of them at the 3 because they're both very small. They're both around 6'3", I believe, so you can't start them at the small forward because then your defense just tanks. I don't love the fit for CJ McCollum. I've never been a big fan of that being the deal for the Sixers, so personally, I don't like it a lot. I think it's better than the other two, but I still don't like it very much. And finally, we get to the Sacramento Kings. This is where I think they have the best option for a deal. To me, the best deal that I have seen be proposed out there, that there's even been rumors that this was offered, was Ben Simmons to the Sacramento Kings for Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, and Tyrese Haliburton. Maybe a pick or two's thrown in there, whatever, but that is the deal. That is the one I like the most. I think that one makes a ton of sense. The Sacramento Kings, sure, they have to give up Haliburton, and he's been really good, so maybe they don't necessarily want to do that. Maybe they try and throw in De'Aaron Fox instead. But from the Sixers' perspective, which is what we're looking at it from, I want Tyrese Haliburton. The way that he has played, his facilitation, his better shooting than De'Aaron Fox, I like that more for Embiid. You add in the fact that you're going to get Buddy Hield, who's one of the better shooters in the league from volume. Imagine him shooting off of double teams from Joel Embiid. You've got Harrison Barnes, who gives you a big defensive wing that can help out on bigger wings. He can guard a multitude of positions. Harrison Barnes is just all around a really solid player. So I like him a lot for the team as well. And if you're able to add a pick or two, that's an awesome trade for you. Now, you can talk about whether the Sacramento Kings want to do that. I'm strictly looking at this from a Sixers perspective. If you can get that deal, I think adding Haliburton, you run out a starting lineup of Haliburton, Hield, Harrison Barnes, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. I think you're a championship contending team. Because now you've got a bench of Seth Curry, Tyrese Maxey, Matisse Thybulle, Andre Drummond, Georges Niang. That's a 10-man playoff rotation. And that's really good. That doesn't even include like a Korkmaz who can come in for certain situations as well. I think that is an incredible team when you look at it. They're deep, they can shoot, and they play really well around Joel Embiid. The only player on that team that can't really shoot is Matisse Thybulle. And even then, he can sometimes catch and shoot threes. He's at least a threat out there at times. So those are my thoughts on Ben Simmons trades. I think if you're going to make one, if you get that Kings deal, you should take it. Or at least you should look really, really hard at it and be sure you want to pass it up. So do I think the Sixers should trade Ben Simmons now? I think they should take advantage of this season that Embiid is having, and I do think they should trade Ben Simmons, assuming a deal like that Kings one pops up. If that pops up, that is such a good deal. because not only do you get those players now, but going into next season, you have Tyrese Halliburton improving. You still have Buddy Hield, who's a great shooter. Harrison Barnes. Those two guys aren't going to decline. You add in another year of development for Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey. These really solid young players, and you can keep getting better. And say things don't work out, there still is Tobias Harris, who can be traded for other options. So overall, I think if you get a trade like that, you make the deal. I do see the kind of interest and intrigue in waiting till the offseason. Maybe this whole thing is just Daryl Morey posturing and saying, we'll see what happens, trying to raise Ben Simmons' trade value. Maybe it's not. But overall, I think it's super interesting to kind of make this debate of if they should trade him now, if they should wait. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Should they trade him now? Should they wait? Does it depend on the packages they get? And if you do think of a great Ben Simmons package, leave it in the comment section below and even predict, do you think he'll get traded now? Do you think it'll be after the end of the regular season, end of the playoffs? And if so, where do you think he's going? I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I will see you all later. Ray won't say it back.